You know what's terrifying? Working your whole life, saving every single penny, hitting that retirement number, and then running out of money at 75. You're sitting there with an empty account, wondering how everything went wrong when you did everything right. That nightmare scenario happens more often than you'd think. It's not because people didn't save enough. It's because they followed the wrong advice about spending what they saved. Everyone talks about the 4% rule. Withdraw 4% of your portfolio in your first year of retirement, adjust for inflation each year, and you're golden for 30 years. Sounds perfect, right? Except it's not. The 4% rule was created in 1994 based on historical data that doesn't match today's reality. Back then, bond yields were higher, stock valuations were different, and people weren't living as long. The world has changed, but retirement advice hasn't caught up. That's where the 3% rule comes in. Most people ignore it because it sounds too conservative and too boring. But here's what nobody tells you. The 3% rule is the difference between sleeping peacefully and lying awake, wondering if you'll outlive your money. It's the difference between financial freedom and constantly checking your portfolio with anxiety. What does the 3% rule actually mean? It's simple. In your first year of retirement, you withdraw 3% of your total portfolio value. If you've got $1 million saved, you take out $30,000 that first year. The next year, you adjust for inflation. If inflation was 3%, you'd withdraw $30,900. You keep adjusting each year to maintain purchasing power. No complicated formulas, just 3% to start and inflation adjustments moving forward. I know what you're thinking. $30,000 a year doesn't sound like much, especially if you've been making $80,000 or $100,000 during your working years. Here's where the magic happens. That $30,000 is just from your portfolio. You're probably also getting Social Security, around $1,800 a month or $21,600 a year for the average American. Add those together and you're at $51,600 annually. Plus, you're not paying into Social Security, not contributing to retirement accounts, and if your house is paid off, expenses drop significantly. That $51,600 can feel like $70,000 did when you were working. But the real power of the 3% rule is what happens over the next 30, 40, or even 50 years. Unlike the 4% rule, which has a 96% success rate over 30 years, the 3% rule has virtually 100% success. We're not just talking about making it to year 30. We're talking about making your money last potentially forever. With a 3% withdrawal rate, historical data shows your portfolio often grows. You could end up with more money at 90 than you had at 65. That means you're not counting pennies at 80. You're still taking vacations, helping grandkids with college, making a difference with charitable giving. You're living with abundance. Most importantly, you're sleeping at night without that gnawing fear of running out. Why does the 4% rule fall short? When Bill Bengen created it in 1994, he asked, "What's the highest withdrawal rate that would survive the Great Depression and 1970s stagflation?" The answer was 4%. But notice the key word, survived. The 4% rule was designed to make sure you don't run out of money, not to give you peace of mind or leave a legacy. It was the bare minimum, not optimal. Fast forward to today, and the financial landscape looks completely different. Bond yields are lower than the 1990s. Stock valuations are higher. People are living longer. The average 65-year-old today can expect to live into their mid-80s, and many make it to their 90s. That's potentially 30 years of retirement, longer if you retire early. Suddenly, the 4% rule designed for 30 years starts looking risky. Morningstar, one of the most respected financial research firms, did updated analysis in 2025. They found the safe withdrawal rate for today's retirees is closer to 3.7% to 3.9%, not 4%. That's assuming you're okay with a 10% chance of running out of money. A 10% chance might not sound like much, but would you get on a plane with a 10% crash chance? Probably not. So why risk your entire retirement on those odds? The 3% rule eliminates that risk almost entirely. It gives you margin for error. It protects against sequence of returns risk when bad market years hit right at retirement's beginning. If you retire in 2026 with $1 million and the market drops 30% in 2027, you're down to $700,000. Withdrawing 4% or $40,000, that's now 5.7% of your remaining portfolio. You're in trouble. But withdrawing only 3% or $30,000, that's 4.3% of what's left. You've got breathing room. The 3% rule gives you flexibility. Life happens. You need a new roof. You want that dream trip to Europe. Healthcare costs spike. With the 3% rule, you've got cushion to handle unexpected expenses without derailing your retirement plan. You can take out an extra $10,000 or $20,000 in a given year and still be fine because you've been conservative all along. But what if you want to retire early? If you're part of the FIRE movement, financial independence retire early, the 3% rule becomes even more critical. The 4% rule was built for 30-year retirement starting at 65. But if you retire at 55, you're looking at 35 or 40 years. If you retire at 45, you might need money to last 50 years. The only way to make that work sustainably is being more conservative with withdrawals. The 3% rule is essential for early retirees who want true security. The 3% rule requires discipline. You might need to save more before retiring or adjust lifestyle expectations in retirement. But the trade-off is a little less spending today for complete peace of mind tomorrow, a slightly smaller first-year withdrawal for knowing you'll never be a burden on your children, a modest lifestyle now for the ability to be generous later. Most people find once they adopt the 3% rule, they don't miss the extra money. Financial stress is exhausting. It drains energy, ruins sleep, and steals joy. When you eliminate that stress by knowing your money will last, you actually enjoy retirement more, even with slightly less spending. You're not constantly worried. You're not refreshing your portfolio balance daily. You're not panicking when markets dip. You're free. Here's what you can do right now. Pull out a calculator. Look at your current retirement savings or retirement goal. Multiply it by 0.03. That's your first-year withdrawal under the 3% rule. Now add expected Social Security, any pensions or other income sources. Does that cover your basic expenses? If yes, you're in great shape. If no, you've got a clear target. Either save more or find ways to reduce retirement expenses. The 3% rule isn't sexy. It won't make headlines. Financial gurus won't get excited because it's too simple and too conservative. But it works. It's worked through every market crash, every recession, every period of high inflation we've ever had. It's the quiet strategy that lets regular people retire with confidence and live with dignity. Most people ignore the 3% rule because they're chasing higher returns, bigger withdrawals, and riskier strategies. They want to believe the 4% rule will work, or they can time the market. But hope is not a strategy. Retirement is too important to gamble with. The 3% rule is your insurance policy against the unknown. It's your hedge against living too long, markets underperforming, or inflation running higher than expected. Financial freedom doesn't come from having more money. It comes from knowing the money you have will be enough. The 3% rule gives you that knowledge. It gives you confidence. It gives you peace. In retirement, peace of mind is worth more than any extra percentage point you might squeeze from your portfolio. Stop ignoring the 3% rule. Start planning with it. Your future self will thank you.